Okay, so today we're doing a deep dive into a really significant area, the whole dynamic between Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and Ukraine.
Yeah,
We're using a recent New York Times analysis as our guide here.
right. A really insightful piece.
Our mission, basically, is to unpack what the Times sees as the key factors in this relationship and, what it might all mean.
And what's striking right away is how the New York Times looks back historically.
Hmm.
It sort of highlights this pattern in Trump's views, his approach to both Ukraine and Russia. That context is pretty crucial.
Okay, let's dig into that pattern then.
Mm.
The NYT piece is quite direct about Trump's history of, well, questioning aid to Ukraine.
Yeah, questioning it and sometimes seeming reluctant.
And they link that to his more positive comments about Putin over the years.
Right.
The analysis suggests pretty strongly, actually, that if he were reelected, U.S. policy could, shift quite a bit.
A noticeable shift, potentially.
Yeah, maybe leaning more towards what might be seen as Russia's interests based on things he's said before.
Yeah. And building on that point, the Times also sketches out Putin's perspective, his long-term goals for Ukraine.
These aren't new goals, according to the NYT.
Right, not at all. The analysis presents them as pretty consistent objectives he's had for a while.
Okay.
So this potential change in U.S. leadership, you have to assume Putin is watching that very, very closely.
Naturally. So the New York Times then looks at how these two things might, interact. Trump's approach and Putin's goals.
Exactly. It's not just about their separate views.
Yeah.
It's how Trump's specific stance, that skepticism on aid, the different tone towards Russia, how that could maybe help or maybe hinder what Putin wants in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. And the NYT does raise some pretty critical scenarios, things to watch out for.
Like what specifically?
Well, the analysis sort of hints at real consequences for the conflict itself, suggesting changes in U.S. policy aren't just abstract. They could actually affect things on the ground in Ukraine.
Right, tangible effects.
Yeah.
And the Times piece doesn't just stop there at Ukraine's borders.
No, it broadens out. It looks at the bigger picture, too. The ripple effects for international relations generally.
Yeah, potential shifts in alliances we thought were stable, maybe even a bit of destabilization in the geopolitical landscape.
The level of uncertainty that the article points to is really quite something.
It is. And what's valuable, I think, is how the New York Times emphasizes that potential for change. History gives us clues, sure, but
The future isn't set.
exactly, it's still very much in flux. Depends on a lot of factors going forward.
Okay, so let's try to quickly sum up the core takeaway from the New York Times here.
Okay.
We have Trump's established skepticism about Ukraine aid, his sometimes warmer rhetoric towards Putin,
Right.
which suggests a possible break from current U.S. policy.
A shift Putin might view as, let's say, advantageous for his own long-term aims regarding Ukraine.
Leading to potentially significant consequences, both for the war itself and the wider world stage.
Which really brings us to a crucial question, maybe something for you, the listener, to think about. Considering everything the New York Times lays out, all these dynamics we've just touched on, what single aspect of this potential shift in the Trump-Putin-Ukraine relationship do you think poses the biggest risk for long-term global stability? Something to ponder.